Live from our studios in Kingstown, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. It's your favorite Thursday night show, Up Late with Sion Marshall. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the host of tonight's show, Sion Marshall.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's edition of Up Late with Sion Marshall. It's a beautiful and warm Thursday evening. It's the 4th of September, 2025. As always, I'm happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining. We have an exciting program in store for you this evening. But first, as always, I must ask you to share the live. And so while you share, I am going to be doing the same thing and sharing the live. Naturally, as always happens, if there is an issue with the audio, please do let us know by just putting a comment there, and we would address the audio situation. So I'm going to share the live now. Oh, there we are. Alrighty. Um, sharing the live. I'm sharing the live. I'm sharing the live. Where are we? Why is it when I try to share from here, I can't share it? Like, what is going on here? What is going on here? Okay, let's try. Let's try something else. Um, so I have to go to Facebook itself. I am sharing the live. I'm sharing the live. I'm sharing the live, and we have a really good program in store. Now, I know, where are we? Yes, there you are. I know some of my regular viewers would not be on because uh, at the same time, we're having the ULP Speaks on as well. So I know some of my regular viewers may not be a part of this evening's program, but that's okay. Um, I am always elated and excited when you do join. And I am also very grateful when you share the live and you promote the program that we have. So it's Up Late with Sean Marshall. It's Thursday night, and we have a discussion. I have a discussion that I want us to engage in, and hopefully, we can get a broader understanding of where my mind is with regards to something. Because as the election campaign heats up, you're going to hear more and more of what I'm going to be talking to you about. You're going to hear it more and more. More and more individuals, the opposition that really, in my view, doesn't have or is not yet offering a clear set of policy positions that they want us to support, they are resorting to more talking points, more fluff and less substance. That's my estimation, and you're free to disagree with me on that one. But that's just my own assessment so far. So as the election campaign heats up and we get more into the campaign season, you're going to hear more of these talking points and less of substantive discussions around policy positions. Now, before I continue, as I go further, I want to congratulate the Jamaica Labour Party on the third winning the general elections in Jamaica, signaling a third term for the Andrew Holness government. The elections were, from all indications, very keenly contested, with the Jamaica Labour Party, GLP, the incumbent, losing 15 seats. They had 49 seats in Parliament to, I think it was about 12 or something like that, or to the PNP. The PNP was able to flip 15 seats, so it was a 40 49 to 14, I believe, 49 to 14. The PNP was able to flip 15 seats, now controlling 29 seats in the parliament to the GLP's 35. So it was clearly a keenly contested elections. Quite a number of seats were flipped, And so there is greater representation of the opposition PMP in the parliament. Now there's a bit of a confusion because you know the GLP is Labour and they refer to themselves as Labour Right. I see a lot of videos and so on, and they're talking about Labour Right. But the GLP in Jamaica is not the sister party of the ULP here. The sister party of the Unity Labour Party in Jamaica is the People's National Party, the PNP. The GLP is the sister party of the NDP, right? So just, I know there are a number of individuals who hear Labour and assume that the GLP is the sister party of the ULP because they both have the word Labour in their names. That is not the case, all right? The second thing I want to touch on before I go forward, Toya, good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining the program. The second thing I want to touch on this evening is the situation that's currently unfolding in our region, in our waters, where the Venezuelan people are facing serious aggression from the United States of America. We know, good night, my Gemma, good night, my sister. We know that the US has a record of paying very scant regard to international law. And this is playing out right now in our region where just recently the US murdered 11 individuals on a boat. The authorities in the US referred to them as terrorists, said they were drug traffickers. But even so, that's not the world that we live in. There's something called due process. And even if those individuals were committing a crime, they are entitled under the law to a process. They must be taken to court, they must be tried, they must be found guilty in a court of law. That did not happen. The US has essentially named itself judge, jury, and executioner. And so these individuals, who for all intents and purposes could be fishermen, I don't know, but even as I said, even if they were drug dealers, they are entitled to due process. However, the United States used drones and murdered all 11 individuals in that boat in international waters. And for some reason, they find solace. They think it's okay to simply say, oh, they were terrorists and they were peddling drugs, they were trafficking drugs. Well, it reminds me, that talking point and those actions remind me of another country that engages in similar um, actions, and that is the state of Israel. The state of Israel executes anybody at will: children, women, journalists, aid workers, paramedics, at will. And their justification very often is that they were working along with Hamas. Again, individuals who are accused of committing crimes are entitled to due process. Taking action to murder them without process is just as criminal as the act you are accusing them of. Now, what concerned me about the actions of the US in the region is the response of some of our governments, specifically the government of Trinidad and Tobago, as articulated by its Prime Minister. The Honorable Prime Minister was heard saying that she was happy and she wanted the US authorities to execute them violently. Now, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is a lawyer. She's an attorney by training. And so that concerned me, that a leader in our hemisphere is willing to sacrifice international law. And I'm not sure for what purpose. we have to be concerned also because we understand that at any time it can be our turn. At any time, people can be aggressive to us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We do not have a military, we do not have an army. And so the question then becomes who or what saves us from aggression? And if we allow individuals to trample on international law and not stand up and not let their voices be heard in rebuke and in denouncing criminal actions, then who saves us when we become the victims? I am grateful and I'm happy that Dr. Ralph Gonzalez and other leaders in CARICOM have issued statements expressing opposition to what the US did and continues to do in the region. And we must stand united on this. And our unity is one that protects, shows our respect for and adherence to international law, first and foremost. And it also shows our respect for the principles of sovereignty. Because a country may not like what is happening in another country, like Venezuela, for example, it doesn't give any country the right to decide that they're going to go in, be aggressive, and take action. In the same way, it was wrong for Israel to bomb Lebanon, to bomb Syria, to bomb Iran. All of those were violations of international law. All of them were. All of them were. And even the genocide that is being committed in Gaza, all of those are against international law. They're all war crimes and crimes against humanity. But yet they continue with impunity. And when we see these things happening, you have to ask yourself, if that can be done with such impunity, with such disregard for human life, and you look, for example, at the ambassador of Israel to the United Nations when these things are being debated, and he doesn't care. I mean, he doesn't care. He's on his phone. He's not even listening because he knows at the end of the day, the powerful America that is committing similar crimes in our region is going to back them to the hilt and block any actions in the UN. But history is being written. History is being written. And I believe that when it's all said and done, it's all written, many individuals would find themselves on the wrong side of history. And in that regard, they would have a heavy price to pay. I promise you that. Now, finally, before I get into the debate or the discussion that I have planned, I want to congratulate all of those students and all of those schools that performed well in the in the recently concluded CSEC exams. The results are out now, and there have been, by all reports, some excellent results. You had the three schools in the 90s, including my alma mater, St. Martin Secondary. You had another five schools in the 80s. I believe the two convents. I think Thomas Saunders. Um, I believe Kanawan Secondary. So you had a number of schools in the 80s, and essentially between 60 and 79, I think you had another 17 schools. I, as far as I'm told, there were only two schools that fell below 50%. Keep in mind that there are some 28 secondary schools in this country. And of the 28, I believe two of them fell below 50%. That is remarkable, and all of the stakeholders must be commended: the students, the teachers, the parents, those who offered support, the support systems from the Ministry of National Mobilization, the National Lotteries Authority that offer support to students, the Cabinet of Ministers of St. Vincent and Grenadines, who drives the policy of education, all must be commended. The students for their hard work. You can't stress enough how important that was for them working hard, and they've seen those results. So congratulations to the students, congratulations to their schools, and keep soaring. I know a number of them have already started the community college. The community college, you see the students going out there, the new students going out there. So a new journey started. Congratulations are in order. Now, as I talked about schools, I want Vincentians to hear me, and I'm not speaking to any particular set of Vincentians, whether it is Vincentians who support one party or the other. I want to speak to Vincentians generally. Now, let me just check this quickly because I saw something there, and I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to it. All right, because I don't know who all they are, eh? But I know Gemma is on, I know Toya is on, and I said good night to those individuals. Um and ooh, sorry. I was just checking on YouTube there to see if and yes, I see I know Jill likes to watch YouTube, so I wanted to make sure that we have, yeah, good. All right. Nice. So the we talk about schools. During this week, I had a reason to call two radio stations on the same day. I get very busy in the morning. I may call Boom, then from Boom I go into Star Radio. As you know, I do the morning scoop, and from time to time I also get to call get to call Hot 97. Now, Boom Radio is a regular thing. I do it Monday to Thursday at 7:20. But Hot 97, it's not a regular thing. Sometimes I get in, most times I don't. Most times I don't. But I am hearing a narrative, and it's very prevalent. And it's a narrative that suggests a particular mindset. The narrative says whenever the ULP talks about what they've done, when the ULP talks about its record over 25 years, the narrative becomes, or the response to that record becomes, but it's 25 years you've been there. One can't expect that after 25 years, nothing ain't do. Now, that becomes the response, especially when you challenge the talking point of the opposition that the ULP has done nothing. So they say the ULP has done nothing. And then when you say them, but hold on, the ULP did this, the ULP did that, and so on and so forth, they go, but hold on, you do expect to be there for so long and nothing do, right? Let me see. Good night to Donnie and good night to Marvin, individuals who are on. So, which is it? Is there an expectation, and is there what sometimes is referred to in law as a legitimate expectation of the populace in terms of what the government ought to do and should be doing? So that's it. That's the response. You can't expect. I spoke to guys in on Hot 97, and that was their response after I got off the phone. You can't expect. Of course, things are going to happen. Of course, this would be done. When I spoke on Boom, the phrase that, or the words used by the host while I was on, and even after I had ended my contribution, was time and progress. The suggestion is that enough time has passed, and as a result, of course, there's going to be progress over time. That's natural. That's natural. And so one needs not seek to take credit for progress that has happened over time because progress naturally occurs. Now, when a child is born, growth may be natural, but for natural growth to occur properly, that child must be fed. That is why, for example, in Palestine right now, children are dying of starvation and children are malnourished. Growth is not happening naturally because there are components that facilitate growth that are missing. There are components that facilitate growth that are missing. And I think that is something that we need to understand. And so when the government talks about its record and speak of the progress made, and the response is, oh, but you've been there for 25 years. Of course, things are going to happen. Of course, progress is going to be made. It gives us a suggestion that the progress is natural and organic, irrespective of what is done. Now, is that really so? One of the challenges that the opposition has, and it may be able to overcome the challenge, who knows, is convincing people that its record while in government between 1984 and 2001 has now become irrelevant and should not be referred to. And so they get annoyed when those who support the ULP go, but when you were there, you didn't do it, or this was the case. And there are those in the media who have accepted that premise that this record is now irrelevant and ought not to be mentioned. The inconsistency, though, is that that position is not a general position because there would be reference to, oh, we had surplus under the NDP, or oh, we had average growth of 4% under the NDP, or oh, when we were in office, farmers were doing well with bananas, or when we were in office, and they would talk about what they consider to be a lot of the positives of their time in government. However, when you question now and you audit, but what about X, Y, or Z? You didn't do this or you didn't do that. They go, but that was such a long time ago. Why are you bringing that up? The truth is that the passage of time does not automatically and organically, naturally guarantee progress. The clearest example of that in our region is Haiti. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, Haiti was considered the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. With the passage of 50 years, or 40 years, or 30 years, Haiti still remains the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And in many instances, has regressed, is actually worse. There has been no progress in certain areas. That is one of the clearest examples that can be cited that the passage of time does not on its own organically guarantee progress. But let's come home and let's talk about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And let's see areas where we consider our country to have progressed. Air transportation. Air transportation. When the NDP came to office, our country had the E.T. Joshua Airport. We also had an airport on Union Island. I believe we had an airport on Canawan and on Mustique. The Mitchell NDP built an airport on Beckway to facilitate air travel between the other islands and the Bequia. That was our level of airport development in 17 years. After 17 years of the NDP, we were nowhere closer to having an international airport. We were promised it. There were studies. As a matter of fact, the former prime minister even bragged that he had the money already in his pocket, but those were only talk. After 17 years, when they were eventually voted out of office, we did not have an international airport. We were nowhere closer. There was no clear plans of towards actually constructing an international airport. As a matter of fact, the former prime minister who led the NDP for 16 plus years, his idea was that they would eventually extend Arnos Vale. But when Arnim Eustace became prime minister, he scrapped that plan completely. Like that was just not even considered. In 15 years, less than 17, of the ULP, there was a plan for an airport. Well, the opposition ULP campaigned about building one. They came to office. They set out to a plan. The plan included how the airport was going to be financed using what was called the Coalition of the Willing. That fell into some problems because, as is public knowledge, the 2007-2008 financial crisis occurred. So a lot of countries that had pledged to work with us and help us to finance the airport were unable so to do. But the government, with the assistance of Venezuela, assistance of Cuba, and other stakeholders, Trinidad and so forth, stuck to their guns and did everything that they could to ensure that the airport was completed. And so within 16 years of being in office, we had a completed international airport, a completed operationalized airport at Argyle. I've just shown you that within the same time periods, under the NDP and under the ULP, with the same desires or desire of having an international airport, one government within a time period with the passage of 17 years couldn't build it. Another government with the passage of 16 years did. If it is that the expectation of with the passage of time naturally progress occurs, why wasn't there that level of progress towards international air travel and air access in St. Vincent and the Grenadines between 1984 and 2001? But let's go further. I wrote the common entrance exam in 1986. And when I wrote the common entrance exam, I attended the Stony Grounds School, Kingston Government School. I can't remember how many of us passed. But the story at Stony Grounds was the same story throughout the country. Those who passed, they were sent into schools. Those who failed and could not and were too old to write the exam a second time went to a senior school, a senior class. At that time, we had seniors 1, 2, and 3. And many of our students fell by the wayside, left school, went to learn trade. Young boys, 12-year-olds and so forth. Some of them naturally fell through the cracks, got into lives of crime. Or girls, some of them, of course, fell through the cracks, got pregnant very, very early, and fell by the wayside. That was because in 1984, when the NDP won, and in 1986, when I would come in entrance, our country did not have the space adequate to accommodate all of our children going from primary school to secondary school. Now, I'll tell you this, and someone reminded me of this recently, and there are individuals who are on the live who may be able to relate, whether as a teacher or as a student. Even at common entrance, everyone did not have a fair chance at common entrance because the schools themselves, they streamed. So you had junior 5A, junior 5B, junior 5C. The students who were in junior 5A were the brilliant students. Those who were average were in 5B. And those who were, you know, really slow were in 5C. And we all know that every student did not have the opportunity of writing common entrance because if the school felt that you were going to fail, they did not let you write it. So it was streamlined, as my friends. It was Darwinian in practice, really. So the bright ones and those who were thought to pass, were able to pass, were sent to write the exam. So a school with a junior five of you have three junior fives, each of them are 30 students, so you have 90 students, may send 70, 65, because you know that 15 they ain't going to pass at all. And many of the schools were concerned about their numbers and their percentages, wanted to keep it up. So you send these students who you know will pass. Between 1984 and 2001, not much change in that regard. By 2001, we still had a situation where just about 40% of our students would pass the common entrance, 38, 40%. And I would say around 45%, at most 50, would actually get into a secondary school. By that time, the senior classes were disappearing. And so, listen, if you were young enough to write it a second time, no problem. If you weren't, you were lost. You were lost. No space was provided for you. But during the time 1984 to 2001, the world had been going through certain changes. Progress was being made, ideas were being developed in education. And one of the things that was being proposed was something called the universal access to secondary education. This concept meant that every child was going to have access to secondary school, whether or not they passed the exam. This concept became alive around 1991, 1992. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as an OECS member state, as well as other OECS member states, signed on to that. And between 1992 and 2001, a number of countries in our region moved towards universal access to secondary education. Clearly, you could see the progress made in other countries, in our region, in the OECS, in CARICOM. They were moving from a situation where they had students being left behind because they weren't accommodating all of the students who were 11 years old into secondary school. They didn't have enough spaces. They progressed to a place where they were able to create the space. They were able to expand education to accommodate all of the students. And you saw progress in that regard as more and more students were accessing secondary education. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, it was not so. The exact situation that we had in 1984, after the passage of 17 years, remained the same. Clearly, you ask, hold on, where's the expectation that, of course, things would happen? One would say, but after 17 years in government, of course we would have universal access to secondary education. But that was not the case. As a matter of fact, if we examine it even deeper, you would find out that the same schools that the NDP met when they came in office, they were 22 in number, were the same number of schools they left after 17 years. Think about that. If if our discussion and if the suggestion is that, look, of course, after 20 years, after 17 years, you're going to have progress. Things are going to be better, things are going to improve. If in fact it was as simple and as organic as some suggest, then where was the progress towards universal access? Is it that we signed on to it, but other countries actually implemented it? Where was the progress and the expansion in education so that more and more spaces were created to accommodate our students? Shouldn't we expect that the government would invest in education, invest in infrastructure, school infrastructure, as it is referred to, as they are referred to as plans? Where's the expectation? So you had 22 schools from Peterborough in north, in the north west, to Georgetown in the northeast, and you had two secondary schools on Beckwith, the Adventist and the Anglican, and you had a secondary school on Union Island. That was what existed. There was time, there was the passage of time, but there was very little progress. Yes, the government accommodated Bethel High School. It was moved from behind in Victoria Park, and it was taken to Camden Park, a nice new school, wonderful, absolutely. And there was also work done to expand space in other schools. There were schools that had work done, absolutely. But at the end of the period of 17 years, were we accommodating all of our children who are 11 years old into secondary school? We were not. We had not progressed towards universal access to secondary education. It is the reason that the ULP had to campaign on universal access because it didn't exist. It did not exist. So we've acknowledged, we agree, the facts are there, that in 17 years, with that extensive passage of time, in terms of education, there was very little, if any, progress at all, especially as we speak to things like universal access to secondary education. As we speak to, there was progress. There was progress in post-secondary, in that the A-level college, or A-levels rather, was moved from the grammar school yard first and foremost down to the annex, which is now housing the curriculum development unit, and then eventually there was an A-level college built, constructed at Glen. So there was progress. Absolutely, there was progress in that regard. Over time, there was progress. Lands were bought, the building was built, there was progress. There was also progress in university education via scholarships. They had, at one point, a 100% increase in national scholarships under the NDP. You absolutely heard me right. They had their biggest increase of national scholarships. They had 100% increase. They went from 1 to 2. I kid you not. They went from 1 to 2, a 100% increase. But it kept falling because eventually they went from 2 to 3, which was a 50% increase. And then they went from 3 to 4, which was a 33% increase. So the percentages kept falling. So by the time they left, you had a maximum of about 4 national scholarships being given a year. That is the level of progress that occurred over 17 years. If you look at the same time period under the Unity Labour Party, the Unity Labour Party took 4 years to implement universal access to secondary education. How did they do that? They expanded most, if not all, schools by building structures, plywood structures, and so forth in the yard to accommodate more students. I believe that year it was close to 2,000 students who were taken into secondary school. So we had gone from within 4 years from about 800 students being accepted to close to 2,000 being accepted. And then, as the government realized that universal access to secondary education was here to stay, and we needed more space, the government decided to go beyond expanding the existing schools to adding, building, creating additional secondary schools. So, over a 16-year period, this Unity Labour Party administration introduced the Bukomedbe Secondary School, school number 1, not in chronological order. That was not the first one. I'm just giving them numbers. So, Bukomedbe Secondary School, the Thomas Saunders Secondary School, the West St. George Secondary School, the George Stevens Secondary School, that's in Connery, the Sandy Bay Secondary School in Sandy Bay, and the Canawan Secondary School. So, having expanded the schools to a point where the government felt, okay, listen, we've expanded enough, that's maximum, but we still have to accommodate students. The government then went about to build new schools. And over the period of 16 to 17 years, the same amount of time as under the NDP, the government was created to build out 6 new schools to ensure that there will always be space for our 11-year-olds, for all of our 11-year-olds to gain a secondary education. Now, how can you tell me when it comes to the secondary schools, universal access? How can you ask me or say to me, but of course, things will happen over time. You've been there for 17 years. Of course, that would happen. But then not concede that the NDP was also there for 17 years and it didn't happen. How can you have expectations for one without conceding the failure of the other? I'm just going to pour a little hot sip, as my brother used to call it. That smells nice. Smells really nice. Right. How can you concede? How can you have an expectation where one is concerned but be unwilling to concede the failure where the other one is? Because if the expectation is, hey, over time, progress must occur, then you have to hold those under whose tenure there was very little, if any, progress at all, to account and go, why didn't you do this? And once you do that, you would then acknowledge, recognize, appreciate that it is occurring now because of a direct, deliberate policy, not simply because of the passage of time. The government had a policy on education. And that policy in education included, among other things, universal access to secondary education. If you look at what the government has done for post secondary training, technical vocational education, you would see the expansion. You have the technical college or the division of technical vocational education expanded. There was a time, there was a time, young people may not know this. There was a time when technical college was seen as the place for people who didn't do too well in school to go learn a trade, to go learn a little mechanic and so on. So you get a little 3 subjects and 2 subjects, you know, you ain't get the 5 subjects. So once you get the 5, 6 subjects, you're going A levels. Once you get the 5, 6 subjects, you go on A levels. It's when you couldn't muster the 5, 6 subjects, you get a little 3 subjects and so on, you go on technical, generally speaking. The bright ones didn't go to technical. You hear me? The bright ones did not go to technical. They went to advanced. They went to A levels. Now, back then, the technical college, as it was called, offered what was called the City and Guilds, which was a UK certification, highly recognized. But that was where those who couldn't muster the A levels would go. You couldn't go levels, you go technical. Today, our brightest and our best are competing for spaces at the technical college, as we call it, the Division of Technical Vocational Education and Training, to do areas in IT and tourism and management and marketing and so forth. Very popular, very popular. And of course, the traditional skills of air conditioning and auto mechanic and so forth, still done, much improved at the Division of Technical Vocational Education and Training. So you also have had that expansion in technical vocational education and training. And of course, the one that is always talked about, bragged about, the significant increases in university attendees from our country, from the many islands of our country. All the majority, 95% supported by our government. So you go to the University of the West Indies, hundreds of Vincentian students. You go to Taiwan, 100 and something Vincentian students. And studying here via distance, thousands, all supported by our government. You think something like that is happening simply because time is passing and simply because we are in 2025? Go to the other countries and see how many of them are doing that. And you ask yourself, but if it's simply time and progress, why aren't the other countries doing that as time is passing? Why aren't they progressing in the same way as we are? Why isn't their governments giving them money to study? Because that's not their policy. That's not their policy. So when I hear the talking point, and you have to be careful as they come to you, they go to their meetings, they talk on their mics, and they give you the impression. And of course, very subtly, those in the media who carry the narrative, oh, but we're back there for, we're here now, you're there for 20, 25 years, you should do it. The only reason I have to do it is because no one else did. And how is it those who were there and never did could come and criticize me who's doing? And when I raise that, you go, oh, but why are you going back there? The only reason this ULP administration had to build a school in Kanawan is because for 17 years, NDP didn't do it. The only reason that this ULP had to introduce universal access to secondary education in this country was because after 17 years, the NDP did not do it. You ever realize that? Have you ever thought about it that way? The reason why our public servants, our teachers, our nurses, our police are building homes rapidly now, more rapidly than ever before, is because before this ULP administration, there was no 100% mortgage. There was no 100% mortgage. This government had to do it. The things that we now enjoy and we talk about, and in too many instances we take for granted, we ought to be reminded that the reason they are being done by this Unity Labour Party administration is not because they weren't necessary then. It's not because people didn't need it then. It's not because it was too early to be done then. It was simply because the priorities of the former administration did not include those policies. It did include taking care of our 11-year-olds and making sure that they had access to secondary education. It didn't include ensuring that our hardworking policemen and nurses and doctors, teachers, public servants were able to go to the bank and say, listen, I have the security of tenure as a government worker. And the bank would say, you know what you do? So here's 100%, bail your house. Because the truth is, the day your house done, the value gone up. So imagine you building 300,000 dollars to build a house. You build the house, and the day the house done, the house is worth 350 immediately off the bat. In a couple of years, depending on the neighborhood and depending what happens in the neighborhood, it value 400,000. So teachers, public servant, policemen, nurses, they are able to buy or build homes, having access to 100% mortgage, something that the previous administration had the opportunity to do, but chose not to do. And so this ULP had to come and do it. So do not for a second fall for the talking point that, listen, man, it's the passenger time. Of course, things will get better. Of course, things will get better. Of course, with things happening, more and more people will. Nah, not just so. It requires a deliberate policy. And when we look at what the government is doing, we can name, look, going into these elections, whenever they're called, most individuals, I like that statement by Marvin Graham. I want my producer put it up on online day. Choose performance over promises and protect our gains. I like that. We can name any number of policies of the government, and we could talk about what those policies are doing for us as Vincentians. I don't know if we are so able to do them where the NDP is concerned, because the truth is we don't know the policies. I know of two clearly articulated policies of the NDP. Two. They're going to switch from Taiwan to China, and that's their right as a government. and they're going to sell passports. Now, of course, the whole idea of selling passports getting some licks these days, even with Mia Motley coming out very strong. And Mia Motley is the NDP's darling, because any leader in the region who comes out, saying something strong and so forth, they would jump, and they would start to, exalt that leader and go, oh, look at that, that's leadership. I wish we had a leader like that. I hear them here trumpeting her since she came out and saying Barbados will not sell passport. Barbados will not. I wonder if Gaston Brong and the others and what's the guy's name in St. Lucia? Chasney. I wonder if they're going after Mia Motley too, because she's responsible. I tell you, those are the only two stated policies. And as a matter of fact, even now, when you ask them about China, they tell you, we go assess it when we get there. You know why they're saying that? Because they know Vincentians, the majority of Vincentians are not first switched from Taiwan to China. And so they're trying to hold it back. They're not campaigning on it. Because when they campaign on that policy, they want the mandate from you, the voter. They want the mandate from you to say yes. When you vote for them and they win, they have all right to switch because you have given them the mandate. But the dishonest thing is, by not telling you no, when you ask, what are you going to do? Are you going to switch? I can't tell you no. When I get there, I will assess. As soon as they get there, they will switch. And they will be, even though they have not been given a full mandate on that because they didn't campaign on it, they will tell you, well, you elected us to lead. And in our assessment, this is the best thing. Because you gave them that. But that and the selling of passports are the two clearly articulated policies of the NDP. Otherwise than that, we don't know what their policies are. We don't know what their policies are. But what I can tell you is that this ULP administration has articulated very, very clear policies. And they've gone a step further and implemented those policies as promised. And those policies, tonight I spoke specifically to education, those policies have caused our country to progress, to grow, to move forward. Not simply because time is passing, not simply the passage of time, not simply because we are in 2025. Absolutely not. And if we don't appreciate the fact that it is the policies of the government that has us where we are, you graduates who are making your money now, you individuals who have your degrees, your children, not you, your children, you didn't have the opportunity to have access to secondary school because you had to stay home and watch siblings. Or you were too old by the time you got to common entrance class. And when you failed the first time, you couldn't write it the second time. So you went to seniors. And you could talk about all of the stories and all the reasons why you aren't where you should have been or could have been had you been given the opportunity. But today, you are seeing those opportunities being made available to your children, to your grandchildren, not because time is passing, not because we're in 2025, but because a government who understands their role and cares about our people is making sure that they develop and implement policies that will achieve their goals. And so you have to determine whether you're going to ensure that the benefits of the policies implemented continue to reach your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, or you can decide that you want a change to what I don't know and hope, like as was the case between 1984 and 2001, that somehow, with the passage of time, there may be some progress because we don't know what the policies they're going to implement are, except selling passport and switching to China. And with that, we've come to the end of another a lively edition of Uplift with Sion Marshall. I want to thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place, as we continue to look at issues affecting us. Now, let me just say this. I have not heard, the last time I was here, we had the Millicity Brothers, good program. And because the campaign is coming up and starting, I want to be a bit more political, but I would have, I'm going to try and have guests. And let me tell you this, you see my platform this year, which am I known? I am going to engage everybody. So expect there to be some, if they will come on, some supporters of the New Democratic Party engaging us on this platform, as well as supporters from the Labour Party. And the best part would be if I could have both at the same time, so that they could address each other with me being the referee. But we could see how that will work out. Until next week, have a good night. God bless.